Hello there, I'm Mick Cornett, the Mayor of Oklahoma City. Welcome to the Mayor's Magazine. On this month's show, we highlight the State of the City Address, which was given on January 15th at the Cox Convention Center. Over 1,000 people showed up. It is sponsored by the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce. My thanks to the Chamber, my thanks to the audience that day, and I hope you'll enjoy these comments as I delivered them on that Thursday afternoon in downtown Oklahoma City. I want to begin today with this 20th century quote from Oklahoma City native Ralph Ellison. This world-famous intellect grew up just a few blocks to our east over in the Deep Deuce area, and he once wrote, "When I discover who I am, I will be free." Now, Ralph did not have Oklahoma City in mind when he wrote that, but in many ways, I believe that 2008 is a year that we will look back upon and say that Oklahoma City discovered who it was. And with that knowledge comes the freedom to be the great city that we can be. Let me draw your attention to all the dramatic changes that have taken place in this city over the last, let's say, 10 years. From the opening of the ballpark, the Ford Center, the canal, the river, the Civic Center, the Norrick Library, to all the stunning improvements that have been made to our schools as a result of Maps for Kids. Take all of that and combine it into one visual image, culminating of this tremendous events in the past year, and you will see this is a city that is reinventing itself. But this golden age that discovered itself in 2008 is just beginning. Allow me to offer that the next 10 years are shaping up to hold opportunities that are bigger and better than anything we've done. In many ways, 2008 was the year that people around the world drew a concrete impression about us. Maybe it was the worldwide attention we generated in getting our own NBA team. Maybe it was the eye-opening thought that we're actually relocating an interstate highway from one part of our downtown to the next. Maybe it was because Devon announced it's building a skyscraper. Or maybe it was because we were the city where that crazy mayor put everybody on a diet. But whether it was sports or transportation or skyscrapers or battling obesity, we were noticed, and generally for all the right reasons. Perhaps no attention, though, was more validating than when the nation's leading economic magazine, Forbes, selected us over every other community in the country as having the most recession-proof city in the United States. That is a big deal. Yeah, congratulations. In fact, if we'd been in the top 20 on a list like that, you'd hear me talking about how impressive it is. Now, we know that no city is impression-proof, but if they're saying we're the most recession-proof, that's probably right. And so far, it's true. In fact, despite the tremendous amount of doom and gloom that dominates the national headlines, our economy is still growing. Our real estate prices are still increasing. Our rates of foreclosures are low. In Oklahoma City, most people can not only afford a house, but they can afford to stay in that house. And they can afford to do it without the fancy, often irresponsible, creative financing that helps send this nation's economy spiraling out of control to begin with. Our unemployment rate continues to be among the lowest in the nation. In fact, last week, they looked at unemployment rates throughout the entire country, and we tied with Washington, D.C. as having the lowest unemployment rate in the country for the month of November. And in the last 5 years, this chamber, working in concert with City Hall and the business leaders, has helped us create over 72,000 new jobs in the metro area. Those are great numbers. Now take a look at this map that was generated in the fourth quarter of last year by the New York Times. The bigger the city, the bigger the dot. Now these are the cities that, in the Times words, are in trouble. Now I want you to look at this map. These are cities where the economy is growing, and you see our big dot there right in the center. And if you updated this map today, I imagine some of these cities wouldn't be on it.
but we would probably still be on this New York Times chart, showing the economies that are growing. Now let's think back to the 1980s. Things in the banking industry in Oklahoma were not so good. In Oklahoma, over 100 banks closed. There was no massive federal bailout for us. In this current economic crisis, banks have failed around the world, but the number of failed banks in Oklahoma City is 0. And the number of failed banks in the state of Oklahoma as a result of this crisis is 0. Now, with the rest of the world dealing with such severe economic issues, it is, of course, only fair to acknowledge that our envious position should be valued and protected. And at City Hall, we are instructing those in charge of our city's finances to maintain the same conservative principles that got us into this place to begin with. But the repercussions of these national slowdowns are being felt at city halls around the nation. And this month, there are dozens of mayors that are standing in front of audiences much like this one, and they're explaining to their constituents why they must cut back on services, why they are going to have to raise taxes. And fortunately, I am not going to be giving that speech today. So the question before us is this: in a golden age for our city, while our economy is more than holding its own, while the rest of the country in both the public and private sectors is dealing with massive debt and in many cases bankruptcy, what do we do? And as I said, other cities will cut back or raise taxes, and in many cases they're going to be forced to close parks and stop investing in their infrastructure. Their progressive ideas about public transit and green initiatives are going to drop down on their priority list. We're not in that situation. We don't need to be closing parks. We don't need to slow down our investment in our infrastructure. And instead of shelving ideas about public transit, I say now is the time to ramp up that conversation. Let's make sure that the world knows that as the nation's energy supply begins this slow transition from fossil fuels to more sustainable forms of energy, that Oklahoma City intends to remain a leader in the energy industry, and that we intend to be progressive. In short, there is every reason for us to take note of the economic climate that is infecting much of the United States, much of the world, but there is no reason for us to stop what we're doing and change course. We didn't get in this lofty position by accident. We got here because we planned and we invested. And along the way, each of us in this community has worked really hard. Our momentum is taking on speed, and we're not going to stop now. This state, the state of this city, might be stronger here than any other city in the United States. Now, in our development as a city, we have taken many of the right steps. Already in just this decade, we've taken many steps that were the correct steps to invest in what was important. We invested in public safety. We invested in water and our schools and our street infrastructure. And upon that foundation, we also focused on building a city where people want to live. And when you look at where we are and how far we've come in adding and improving amenities like libraries, sports arenas, and music halls, and canals, and a river, you see many of the reasons why the quality of life in Oklahoma City has continued and so dramatically improved, and so many jobs have been created.